It's the 29th of September 1978. 15-year-old Mary Vincent finds herself on the side of a road in Berkley, California with two other people, as she's currently hitchhiking 400 plus miles to Corona, California to live with her grandfather. Sticking her thumb up at the side of the road, a blue van would pull up alongside Mary. Inside the van would sit a middle-aged, balding man in the driver's seat. The driver would tell Mary that he only had room for her and not the other two. Mary would speak with the others, who would warn her not to go with the man, sensing something wasn't quite right. He seemed to have plenty of room, but was adamant he would only take Mary. Mary would decide to take the ride, ignoring the advice from the other two hitchhikers. It would be a decision that she would regret for the rest of her life. Hello, and welcome to the channel. To understand why Mary was hitchhiking in the first place, we need to first take a look at her background in more detail. Born in 1963, Mary was one of 7 children to parents Herb and Lucy. Mary would grow up in Las Vegas with her father working as a gambling machine repairman and her mother working as a casino dealer. Her parents raised their children in a strict environment, but as Mary entered her teenage years, she would test their patience repeatedly, bunking off school and wearing makeup. Despite Mary's rebellious nature, she was focused on her ambitions to become a dancer. Specifically, she dreamed of one day becoming a lead performer at the Lido di Paris Cabaret in Las Vegas. By 1978, things were stressful for Mary and her family. Herb and Lucy's marriage would break down, resulting in the couple beginning divorce proceedings. Mary would grow to become frustrated in her surroundings and made the decision to run away from home with her boyfriend at the time. After leaving home in the summer of 1978, Mary and her boyfriend would spend time in Sausalito, California, with the pair living out of the boyfriend's car. However, this was relatively short-lived after police arrested Mary's boyfriend on suspicion of raping a high school teenager. After her boyfriend's arrest, Mary would initially sleep rough or in unlocked cars before travelling to SoCal, California to live with her uncle. However, this would be short-lived as Mary would eventually decide to travel over 400 miles to live with her grandfather in Corona, California. It's here that we arrive at the point where Mary hitched a lift with the man in the blue van. The man told Mary that he was travelling to Reno, Nevada. However, he would be prepared to take her as far as Los Angeles. Initially, Mary felt relatively relaxed with the driver. She sparked up a cigarette and began smoking. But soon into the journey, she sneezed, prompting the driver to ask her if she was sick. He reached his hand around to the back of her neck, saying that he was just checking her temperature. Mary quickly assured him that she was well, jerking away in the process and resting her head against the passenger door. He released his grip off of her and popped his hand back onto the steering wheel. While the man's touching was certainly unwelcome, Mary eventually brushed this off as the man just simply being concerned. Reportedly, the man said that he needed to stop by his home in San Francisco to pick up some laundry. Mary was trusting enough of the man at this point to agree to the pit stop, even helping him put the items into his van in the process. Back on the road, the man was now drinking from a milk carton that actually contained liquor inside. By now, Mary felt safe enough that she would fall asleep. When Mary woke up, she immediately recognised something wasn't right, as she noticed that the man was travelling in the wrong direction. When Mary saw that the road signs showed they were heading straight towards Nevada, alarm bells began to ring. Mary, in a moment of anger, looked around and found a long, sharp stick. Picking it up, she pointed it at the man and demanded that he turn the vehicle round or let her out of the van. Surprisingly, the man assured Mary that he had simply made an honest mistake and took a wrong turn. He turned the vehicle around assuring Mary that she was not in any danger. As sunset approached, the man told Mary that he would need to pull over to relieve himself. He turned off of the freeway and headed down a deserted road along a canyon. Again, Mary began to feel on edge and noticed that her shoes were untied. Not wanting to raise suspicion, Mary decided to wait until the man had pulled over, whereby she could get out of the vehicle and tie her shoes, just in case she needed to make an escape. The man pulled over, got out of the vehicle, and headed towards the back of the van. Mary followed suit and got out of the van to tie her shoelaces. But as she was doing this, she felt a sudden pain on her back. She had been struck with a hammer. Another blow with the tool to the back of Mary's head would render her unconscious. When Mary came to, she found herself in the back of the man's van with her hands tied behind her back. The man then climbed into the back of the van with Mary. "Don't scream, or I'll kill you," he told a petrified Mary. He then ripped off her clothes and forced himself on her. After finishing the assault, he then climbed into the driver's seat of the van and drove a few miles before stopping at Del Puerto Canyon. Mary would beg her captor to free her from her unimaginable ordeal, but the man produced a plastic jug filled with an unknown liquid. Freeing Mary's hands from the ropes, he told Mary that if she wanted to live, she would need to obey his every command. He ordered Mary to drink the liquid, but Mary was rightfully hesitant. "Drink it, or I'll kill you," he told a frightened Mary, who realised she had no choice and consumed the drink. The man would then force himself on Mary again, this time carrying out unspeakable acts in the process. The ordeal would last several hours, with Mary eventually passing out again due to a combination of alcohol and fear. By the time she came to again, she continued to beg the man to set her free. The man ordered Mary out of the van and told her to lie on the edge of the road. She did as she was told, but could hear the man rummaging around in the van. She then felt the man's hand grab her left hand. "You want to be free? I'll set you free," the man said to Mary as he swung an axe into her left forearm. After cutting off her left forearm with 3 strong swings, he moved to the right arm and proceeded to hack away, severing her right forearm too. Reportedly, Mary's left hand was still tightly gripped to the man's sleeve after being cut off, causing him to flail his arm to release its hold of him. Mary's shrieks of unbelievable pain quickly changed to silence. Mary, now motionless, was dragged by the man to an embankment and was pushed down a 30-foot drop. He then stuffed her limp body into a concrete pipe. Leaving Mary there, the man coldly said to her, "Okay, now you're free." The man returned to his van and drove away, convinced he had successfully ended the life of Mary Vincent. However, he was wrong. Mary was still alive. After having her arms removed, Mary's survival instincts had kicked into gear. She remained motionless while being dragged towards the embankment, and after being thrown down it and stuffed into the concrete pipe, she continued to play dead, despite the immense pain and suffering she was experiencing at the time. She waited inside the concrete pipe for several hours in a crumpled position, in fear that the man may be waiting. But by the time the sun was climbing over the horizon, she knew she needed to find help. By now, Mary was extremely weak due to the pain and blood loss, and she knew if she gave in to the urge to rest her eyes, she would never open them again. Mary would use mud and dirt to stuff the nubs, to cauterize the wounds and reduce the amount of blood she was losing. She would then leave the concrete pipe, relieved to find that the man had long since gone. She would then climb back up the same 30-foot embankment she had been thrown from successfully. After reaching the top, she lifted her arms above her head to prevent the muscles in her arms falling out, and she would begin a 3-mile trek out of the culvert, following the sounds of traffic towards a nearby freeway on Interstate 5. Miraculously, she made it to roadside, and not long after reaching the road, a car approached. But the people inside the car, upon seeing Mary, continued to drive, likely in fear of what they were witnessing. Understandably, this was demoralizing for Mary, but shortly after, a couple who were on vacation were driving down the same road. When they witnessed a naked, mutilated Mary, they immediately stopped, placed her into the car, and used linens they had to wrap her up. They would then drive her to a nearby airport and call for an ambulance. Now in hospital, Mary would undergo extensive surgery, which thankfully was successful. She would be fitted with prosthetic arms while recovering. Police would also visit to speak with Mary, who provided them with a detailed account of what happened. She would also assist with providing police sketch artists a description of the man responsible for her ordeal. The image would be released to the public, whereby a man would contact police to say that the man was a neighbour of his. The man, he said, was Lawrence Singleton. Lawrence was a 51-year-old man who had recently split from his wife, whom he shared a teenage daughter with. He was a merchant seaman, but at the time of the attack he was unemployed. Police would arrest Singleton, but he would deny any wrongdoing. In March 1979, Singleton would be in court for the kidnap, attempted murder and sexual assault of Mary Vincent. Mary would attend the trial to bravely give evidence against Singleton. When Singleton took to the stand, he told the court that it was actually he who was the victim. He said that Mary was nothing more than a quote $10 a night whore, who told him that unless he took her to California, she would falsely accuse him of sexually assaulting her. He also told the court that there were 2 other hitchhikers in the van that day, and it was they who mutilated Mary. But when Mary gave her testimony, Singleton's story quickly fell apart. She explained in painful detail the events that took place, referring to Singleton only as my attacker. When she finished, she walked past Singleton, who whispered something to her that caused Mary to quickly leave the courtroom. She later explained to prosecutors that he had said, "I'll finish this job if it takes me the rest of my life." Lawrence Singleton would be found guilty of all charges, but shockingly he was only sentenced to 14 years behind bars. The judge residing the case openly told Singleton if they could, they would lock him up for the rest of his life, but was unable to, as the sentence given to him was the maximum one the judge could hand down. Life after the attack was not easy for Mary. She suffered with severe depression and had to undergo years of physical and mental therapy in order to adjust to a new life with her prosthetic arms. Mary would also be transferred to a new school that was better suited to cater to her needs. Mary would later say that the therapy was unsuccessful and that her old friends distanced themselves from her, with Mary believing that they were either uncomfortable with her prosthetics or that they had grown to hate her. Even more difficult for Mary was soon after her parents' divorce, the family drifted apart. A civil lawsuit was filed following the attack, which Mary won. She would be awarded $2.56 million, but sadly would receive nothing, as Singleton was unemployed at the time of the attack and reportedly only had $200 to his name at the time of his arrest. The ghost of Lawrence Singleton never really left Mary after his conviction. The trauma of the attack, coupled with the threats he made to her at the criminal trial, left her understandably weary of others. Despite this, she would marry in 1987, but this relationship broke down within 3 years. She would, however, give birth to 2 sons during this time. It was also in 1987 that Mary would learn that her worst fear had been realised. Lawrence Singleton, having just served 8 years of his 14-year sentence, had been released on parole. Now with 2 sons and her family spread out from each other, Mary was constantly living in fear that Singleton may track her down and keep to his word. News of Lawrence Singleton's parole sparked protests across California, with many understandably furious that he only had served just over half of his sentence. The justification for his early release, the state said, was for good behaviour. Initially he was paroled to Contra Costa County, California, but found that no town would be willing to accept him into their community. Each time there was an attempt to place him at a location, large numbers of protesters would gather, forcing authorities to remove him, sometimes requiring armed guards and shielding him in a bulletproof vest in the process. As a result, he spent the rest of his 1-year parole in a trailer on the grounds of San Quentin prison, only leaving to collect groceries or to visit the cinema. Singleton, however, still believed he had done nothing wrong, and amazingly convinced himself that it was he who was the victim of Mary Vincent. He lodged a civil complaint, maintaining that Vincent and 2 other hitchhikers had extorted money from him in order to buy drugs. He continued to insist that it was these 2 other hitchhikers who had abused and maimed Mary, but these claims were dismissed outright. After finishing his parole, Singleton would move back to Florida. However, he would find himself in trouble. In 1990, he served a 60-day sentence after he stole a disposable camera worth $10. Later that same year, he would land himself in prison on a 2-year stint after stealing a hat worth $3. After his release, Singleton would seemingly go under the radar until he reappeared again in 1997 after a police officer knocked on his door on the 19th of February 1997. At approximately 6 p.m, Hillsborough County Sheriff's Office received a 911 call from a house painter who had peered into the window of Singleton's home and found him naked and plunging a knife repeatedly into a woman while she lay sprawled on a couch. Deputy Raphael Morphy was dispatched to Singleton's home, but it reportedly took officers 34 minutes to arrive on scene, despite the caller apparently saying to the operator, quote, "The same guy that cut that girl's arms off is beating another woman." The delays were ultimately blamed on a combination of rush hour traffic and lack of deputies due to it being shift change time. When he eventually knocked on the door, Singleton answered. His shirt was covered in blood. Singleton had tried to explain this away by saying he simply cut himself shaving, but when Morphy looked behind Singleton, he could see that on the floor lay the body of a lifeless woman. Morphy arrested Singleton there and then, but was unable to search the home at that point in time, as Singleton refused to allow him into his home. After a 2-hour wait for a search warrant, one was granted, allowing officers to go inside and investigate. The woman was identified as being 31-year-old mother of 3, Roxanne Hayes. Roxanne was known to police, as she had been arrested by them on as many as 99 occasions, mostly on prostitution charges. People who knew Roxanne told reporters that she had struggled with drugs, and she used sex work to support her family. She had been stabbed multiple times and left on the floor in a pool of her own blood. Singleton was taken into custody, and even openly told reporters within hours of his arrest, quote, "I did it." At his trial, Mary Vincent was asked to give testimony, and she accepted, wanting to ensure that Singleton didn't get another chance of another early release. She again bravely stood in the same courtroom with the man who caused her such misery just 2 decades earlier, and told a jury of her harrowing experience. Singleton again attempted to play victim, telling jurors that he picked up Hayes on a Tampa street. He said that she agreed to have sex with him for $20, but he alleged that she tried to take more from him, leading to him, and I shit you not, accidentally stabbing her 7 times while trying to stop her. Obviously, the court sided against Singleton, as it took them just 4 hours on the 15th of April 1998 to sentence him to death by electric chair. The judge presiding over the case told an emotionless Lawrence Singleton, quote, "This was an unprovoked, senseless killing of a human being. We are living in times worse than Sodom and Gomorrah." Mary Vincent appeared at a press conference following the sentencing, telling reporters the following: "I didn't want to play God and don't want anyone's death on my hands, but I think there's a little bit of relief. I think I can start all over and put everything behind me and hopefully be safe and happy." As for Lawrence Singleton, the man dubbed the Mad Chopper died on the 28th of December 2001. It wouldn't be the chair that ended his life. but cancer. Following Singleton's death sentence, the resulting anger over his initial sentencing caused legislators to seek longer sentences for violent criminals. A bill dubbed Singleton's Law was introduced that sought to achieve this aim. The bill was strongly supported by Mary Vincent. Her life would begin to take a more positive turn in the 90s, when she married again in 1998, and would continue to work on her art, using her talent to inspire others. While Mary lives a mostly private life, she is a staunch advocate for victims' rights, and occasionally delivers motivational speeches to people who've experienced traumatic situations. Despite everything Mary Vincent has experienced, she now no longer considers herself a victim. Thank you for watching. If you found this case informative, please consider hitting the like button and sharing this story with anyone you know who shares an interest in true crime content. If you want to support me in other ways, you can subscribe to the channel for more true crime episodes as they're released. You may also wish to consider joining my Patreon or become a channel member, where you'll receive exclusive content and shoutouts at the end of each video. Speaking of which, a special thank you to my current channel members: Needlam Fur, The Alabastard, Mr. Gently Benevolent, Amanda, and Krista Lands. Thank you for supporting the channel. Until next time, take care and goodbye. For now.